Well, I'm very happy to have the chance to host Alberto Ruy Sanchez, a distinguished writer, and I will let Ana Fernandez introduce him in a few seconds. But let me say what a pleasure it is to have Alberto here. We had the chance to meet him with Margarita De Orellana last year in Mexico City. Some of you may remember the tour that we took in the gallery district and then visiting Artes de México, which is this publishing house that publishes beautiful, beautiful magazines dedicated to art and culture of Mexico and really many other parts of the world. And I'm sure this will be exciting. We're going to be on a journey with Alberto. And it will kind of be a way also to introduce our upcoming residency in Morocco, which we're hoping to launch next year. That's the plan. So what a better way to start that than with Alberto Ruy Sanchez, who is an expert of Morocco, has been traveling there many, many years, and has a very particular way of experiencing that place. So let me now ask Ana Fernandez, PhD candidate, IDSVA cohort 17, yes, to please introduce Alberto Ruy Sanchez. Thank you, Ana.
I'm going to read a little bit that I prepared. When asked if Ruy Sanchez imagines Mogador or Mogador imagines Ruy Sanchez, the author responds, "The best answer to that question is the book Poetics of Wonder, Things They Say About Mogador. There you will see that Mogador is many things at once. She's a desirable woman described as a city. It is an imaginary city inspired by a walled port that exists in North Africa. It is a place of fruitful miscegenation where desire lives in a privileged situation. It is a faithful and boisterous echo of the passions that the characters in my novels live." Born in Mexico City in 1951, Alberto Ruy Sanchez is the author of books of fiction, essays, and poetry, which have been translated into many languages. He's best known for a series of novels which take place in the Moroccan city of Mogador and explore the nature of desire. Los nombres del aire, En los labios del agua, Los jardines secretos de Mogador, Voces de tierra, En la mano del fuego, un Kama Sutra involuntario. Since 1988, Alberto Ruy Sanchez has been the editor-in-chief of Latin American's premier editorial house, Artes de México, which has received more than 100 international awards. It is my very pleasure to introduce Alberto Ruy Sanchez, Poeta del Deseo.
Thank you so much, Ana.
Thank you, Ana.
First of all, of course, thanks to the IDSVA program and precisely Simonetta Moro for inviting me to be with you today. Thank you to you all for being here. And the idea of Simonetta was to make with you like a prelude, first step towards Morocco, thinking that you would be in Morocco very soon. And well, time being, nothing is as soon as we would like, but that allows us to really prepare things and go make some steps to the sides before going forward. So I have the privilege of sharing with you some notes of some of the moments that are meaningful for me for my work, and the moments that I nourish my work being in Morocco. I have been in Morocco with my wife, was the first trip, since 1975 was the first time I was in Morocco. And since there, I have been 24 times. I'm not an expert on Morocco, I'm just a fan. And Morocco gave me a lot of things. So part of this talk with you was entitled The Gifts That Morocco Gave Me. thinking, that a gift is much more than a present. The concept of gift is powerful for anyone trying to understand a culture that is not completely modern. So the concept of gift is key to understand cultures like Mexico, for example. I don't know if you thinking that you are in a program where philosophy and thought and anthropology is important. I don't know if you are familiar with this book by the French ethnologist and thinker Marcel Mauss, M-A-U-S-S. In English, it's called The Gift. In French, it's called Essai sur les dons. It's an exploration of societies where there is an economy where expending too much has a meaning. It's pre-modern economies that still exist everywhere in the world. I will tell you a little bit about Mexico, trying to introduce you like the logic that we can also find in Morocco and in other places. For example, the Day of the Dead in Mexico is not only a thing that you do with beautiful altars and colors and the idea that the dead come and drink and eat what you propose them. The celebration of the dead in Mexico is a celebration of a community where things go into a time that is a time out of the everyday life. It's an exceptional time. I can tell you, for example, the last visit I made to a little town named San Gabriel Chilac close to Puebla. We were there the 2 days before the Day of the Dead in the cemetery. People think that Day of the Dead is mainly happens in the cemeteries. But in this town, and in each town of Mexico, it happens differently. The important thing is that something happens. For example, we went to the house of the richest woman of the town. She just died recently. So the family was receiving the salutations of all the town, and they were invited to eat tamales and atole, to have a light dinner for 700 people. And the important thing is that sometimes also the people who have huge problems with this family, for example, the people who were renting houses and they didn't pay the rent and they were almost evicted from their houses, taking advantage of the ceremony of the dead, they come and they pay their respects. And if those respects are accepted, the next day, the family of the dead, of the people who died, brings breakfast to all the people who came in the night before. And if they receive the breakfast, to imagine at least 700 breakfasts, it's coffee and bread really that they give, then all conflict is erased. Lawyers go to hell, and the community make new knots in their ties. So the net of the community reestablishes again. And that vivifies the link between the communities. Well, most of the celebrations where people expense a lot have that function that Marcel Mauss studied, thinking about the gift. The gift is the principle of expending too much to create a new net of people owning to the others symbolically. For example, we all know these traditional celebrations in Mexico City of 15 years. A driver who works in Artes de México asked me to be the godfather of the girl. for this party of her 50th anniversary. I will go very fast on that to go to Morocco, but that helps to understand things that happen in Morocco too. Well, I sit with the driver, and he's making a party where he will expend like 20 times his year's salary. It's not used to raise her salary, but I'm supposed to, as I'm the boss, I'm supposed to pay the dress. But there is also the godfather or the godmother of the music, the godfather of the cake, the godfather of the space where the party will happen. So she has like 20 godfathers. And these godfathers are paying for all the party. It's not the driver who is paying, it's all of us. And if I sit with him and say, well, you know, why so expensive? Okay, I will pay the dress, but why would you spend so much? And he explains me that this girl goes into the world with a link, excessive link, that ties her to us. The result is that with the years, this girl studied medicine at the time where there was no electronic books. Books to study medicine are very expensive. She cannot afford them. I can pay them. So I paid for all her books. But after her party, she went into the world with 20 new godfathers, an extended family. Of course, if I have the slightest health problem, she pays attention to everything that happens to me. I'm the godfather, she's my my goddaughter, you say. So we have an extended family. All the traditional, many of the traditional rituals that we have in societies that look very pre-modern have this sense. And many of the artisan objects produced in these societies were thought for these rituals. So many of the beautiful traditional things you see in Mexico linked to the rituals of the dead are linked to this idea of producing a ceremony on which the new ties of the society are waved in a different way. And society has a new dynamic. Well, having this present was something that the Mexican artist and writer Covarrubias knew very well when he visited Bali. And he wrote the best book on Bali, the island of Bali. He was one of the first Guggenheim recipients to write this book that still is considered the best book on Bali because he understands all this nature of the ritual societies on which art and objects are created to get into these links. So in Bali, for example, the days begin with making links between the visible and the invisible. And you have that even in the tissues. The first knot of the tissues that you buy in Bali are really different to the right extreme, because it's the knot that is like the prayer to make the link between the visible and the invisible. So this idea of making links with fortune is much more than a superstition. It's much more than a religious belief. It's something that links beliefs, heterodox religions, and everyday life of people who lives in communities, making things that for us foreigners are weird or just nice or beautiful or useless, but have another meaning in all these societies. So I will tell you some moments. I could spend many hours telling you about trips to Morocco, because I had wonderful experiences. I have wonderful friends in Morocco, but I will try to offer you some keys to decipher some things that you will see when you visit Morocco. For example, I know that you will be in Marrakech, isn't it? Marrakech is the basis of you. Well, no, you know, one of the main attractions of Marrakech is the main square that is called the Square Juma El Fna. It's a big square in front of the market, between the tower that is called the Kutubia, that is a tower that has the same architecture that one of the towers that you see in Sevilla, that now became part of a Catholic church, and the other sisters, 3 sisters, who are similar towers, is in Rabat, in the capital, in the actual capital of Morocco, Tur Hassan, the Tur Hassan. Well, between the Kutubia, and Kutubia is the name of the tower because in its feet existed a book market that doesn't exist anymore. There is the square, and then the riad with all the traditional market where you buy from dry things, as they said, tissues, arts, and food, and many things happened then. One of the interesting things about this square is that it was qualified by UNESCO as Patrimony of Humanity. And when you are there at 4 o'clock in the morning, there is absolutely nothing. So what is Patrimony of Humanity? It was the first item that was considered oral patrimony. Now they call it intangible patrimony, which is as wrong as the other concept. But it was called oral patrimony of humanity because of the storytellers that are there. There is a gathering of food sellers. There is a lot of stacks. You can eat wonderfully. There is fortune tellers. There is serpent dompters. There is people selling other kind of charms, but mainly there is storytellers. And what is the importance of these traditional storytellers? The importance is, and it was studied, it was a writer, and a Spanish writer, Juan Goytisolo, who lived there, next block to the square, that proposed it to be considered patrimony of humanity. And he afforded to pass it because there is many anthropological studies about this square. And the way the storytelling happens links not only ancient traditions, transmits very important tales for the sense of the identity of the people, but also because it links the community in ways that are unattended, as I told you about the Godfather tradition or the Day of the Dead tradition. I will tell you, I try to explain you how and the way I understood it. You know that travels begin many times when you get into, I don't know if you went to very different places, but if you take a plane to the Guyana, have you been in Guyana? Well, it's not a place where people go, but since the plane that takes you there, that has something of the destination. The book of Oliver Sacks' book on Oaxaca, on the city of Oaxaca in Mexico, begins with a description of the people in the plane. The Mexican woman feeding the baby, the colors, everything. And everywhere that I've been traveling in any vehicle, you can see that. The country begins with the vehicles that takes you there. So I was a student, a poor student. I had 23 years with my wife. We were trying to escape from something that we discovered. We had a scholarship to study in Paris, and we discovered something that we didn't know, and we didn't know how deep that was, and we hated that. It's called winter. Winter is not only that it's cold, it's something that happens in society, like the Parisian society, that changes the mood of people. You know, the French begin to have all the mouth every day lower. People cries to you. The mood of the whole city changes. It's much more than having cold, because you cover if there is snow, you cover. But there is something that takes the power in Paris and lasts at least 10 months. The mood didn't change unless the sun come again. It becomes gray. And so, as innocent Mexicans not traveling at the time too much, we decided to escape from there. And we found a discovery of the French industry of tourism. It was called the possibility of traveling in fourth class. Fourth class was the basement of the ships that took the Moroccan workers that were sometimes swimming, got clandestinely into Paris through Spain, and then with a few money, they had enough to pay a fourth class ticket. So we went into the basement, Margarita and I, my wife is Margarita, and we went into the basement of a ship with 150 other Moroccans, and we were traveling from the south of France, from the port of Sète to Tangier. It was a 38-hour travel, and we didn't know it, but we did it in winter, and there was a storm. And the storm is not as is described in the films, you know, that the ship moves and there is a lot of water. Well, here we didn't see any water because we were in the basement, below the level of the cars. So this was a ship designed in Sweden, and the basement was thought as a movie theater. So we had movie chairs, no security, no security belt, of course. And what really happens in a storm is that the ship clashes against the waves every minute, every half a minute, every 10 seconds. So what happens with your body is exactly what happens when you go into a car, inside a car, and the car crashes against something. The car stops and your body continues traveling. So if you are in the basement of a ship with the ship crashing with the waves every few seconds, your body goes from one part to the other. And there is 150 people doing that. Imagine how it was. It was like an apocalypse, really. Nothing remained in the body, nothing, not even the medicines they gave us to avoid seasickness. The idea you have so many contractions that in some moment, you don't feel that the storm comes from outside into the boat. You feel that the storm is produced by your stomach, by the involuntary contractions of your stomach. And it expands into the, well, imagine that you cannot sleep, of course, but you vanish. It's so strong that you vanish. And we vanished. We stayed there. And 38 hours later, but it lasted, each minute of that lasted for us a long time. But finally, we woke up when there was the local sound saying, we are arriving to the port of Tangiers. The first class the go out of the ship first, and we heard that the first class was running, the second class, the third class, and when they arrived to the fourth class, nobody moved. We were still on the floor, and we walked up a little bit, and we saw behind the room, this room for 150 chairs, there was all the people surrounding a person. And we imagine what there is a fight, or there's instructions to disembark. What is happening? We went to see what was happening at the bottom of the room. And what was happening was men telling a story. It was a man who was a professional storyteller of the Jmal Square of Marrakech. He went to Paris to visit some family, and he was coming back. And the story he was telling, that even if we went through hell the whole night, people didn't want to go because they were really enthusiastically hearing the story. The story he was telling was the story of all of us and what each of us made the night before, while the crisis. So it was amazing because, and when I knew that, I said, I need to visit Marrakech and to visit this place where these storytellers work. And one of the things that I noticed, because he didn't say it, but it was too evident, is that he was telling the story of all of us. So he was getting us from personal interest, but at the same time, he was using the structure of a classic of literature that is called Das Narrenschiff. It's a German classic from the 17th century that's called the Ship of the Fools. And the exact structure of the classic was used to tell the story of each one of us. And that was amazing because without saying that, I realized that in schools and universities, we have many definitions of what a classic is. But for me, in that moment, a classic is a work that allows you to give an order to the chaos of life, to the disorder of life. A classic tale, a classic work of art, a classic work of literature allows you to understand and give an order to that and make it yours. In that moment, I remembered that when I wanted to write, when I decided to become a writer, my interest in becoming a writer was not to see my name in books or to be accepted in a literary circle. I come from a migrant family from the north of Mexico to the center of Mexico, from Sonora, from the Sonora desert to the center of Mexico. So my family is made of people, not only the grandmothers and the older people, but also the kids, that talks a lot and likes to tell stories. So I remember that when I was a teenager and I wanted to write stories, it was because I wanted to share them with my little community, with my family, because we had reunions as a migrant family who moved a lot of people from the north of Mexico to central Mexico. Sometimes we saw each other each week or each 2 weeks, and everybody was telling stories. And I wanted to become a writer for the pleasure of hearing stories and the pleasure of telling stories, the pleasure of sharing stories that make sense in life. For example, one thing that happened in my family is that in Christmas, there is one person who was chosen to give the presents. And instead of saying, this is a present from this one to this one, or from Santa Claus to this one, he was telling a story about the recipient of the present that he was invented in the moment. And all the family needed to guess who was the recipient. So instead of just giving a present, they were telling stories. And the stories were very fun. We had the tradition of making a trip together in the Holy Week. And many things happened. We organized in groups and everything. But after coming back from this 1 week trip, camping together, we needed to do a ritual we call the dinner of forgiveness. And in the dinner of forgiveness, what happens is that everybody tells their point of view of what we live together. The story, the interest of the story each one told was not how it will end, because we lived all the same thing. It's not like a polar. The interesting thing is not who is the murderer. The interesting thing is how each one of us lived the same things that the others were living in the same moment, and how each one of us lived differently. In that ship going to Morocco, I discovered that I wanted to be a writer because I wanted to be someone who shares the pleasure of hearing and telling stories. And I wanted to realize what links that makes with the people I'm telling that. I later learned, looking at all the experience, all the dossier, all the file of why the square was accepted, this Marrakech square was accepted as patrimony of humanity. I read the works, mainly the main anthropologist studying this phenomenon is a writer called Toni Maraini. One of her short stories book is published by City Lights. But she's the daughter of an Orientalist, Maraini, and the sister of one of the best-known Italian writers, Dacia Maraini, who was married to in a time to Moravia, but she's really a brilliant, wonderful writer. And the sister is brilliant too. She lived in Morocco. I met her in Morocco. Then I met her again in Italy. And she studied something that interested me a lot is the concept of halka. You know, these storytellers have what in our modern terms we will call an audience. But this audience, this halka, which is the people who surrounds the storyteller, there's a lot of people passing by, like me and you, when you go there and you hear the story. We are passing by, but there is people who is there always and goes from one storyteller to the other. And these people intervenes in the story, make questions to the storyteller, proposes, and the storyteller improvises variations that includes the people and puts into the action the people who is there. So it is like a celebration of stories of the community. I saw the same phenomenon, for example, in India. In India, there is storytellers who make their story with boxes. They open the box and they open drawers. And in the box and the doors of the boxes, there is characters painted. Many, many characters many times from the sacred tales of the India, which are so many. And when these storytellers goes from town to town, the first thing they do arriving to the town is go into the canteen, the restaurant, or the saloon. They try to go to a people where the village gathers and hear stories and ask about who's there, who's the father, who's the son. And then the next day, when they make their show, they tell the same story. Everybody knows how it will end because it's a sacred story with the Rama brothers and, you know, the Mahabharata or whatever. There's so many stories that everybody knows, but he includes the inhabitants of the town. And that makes of the inhabitants a halka. So when you visit very soon Marrakech, and you see a storyteller in the main square, you can think that there is something else happening than just a people telling a story that could be attractive. There is something that links the neighborhood, the community. There is something that it's creative every time. The storytellers are characters, are very well known, and sometimes they come from other towns, so that's part of their personality. I was familiar with one, unfortunately he died. His name was the son of the insects. Ibn al-Hasharat was his name. He was the son of the insects. And of course, when he arrived, he got me into the tale, and he made, and you know, made some people that was already there knew me, and I knew the other people. And that produced something that is really sometimes meaningful. It's not only an entertainment. It is an entertainment. It's very entertaining, but it's something that gives life to the communities. And you hear many times what is happening, sometimes in very crucial and very dangerous situations that happens all the time in our countries. There is always something happening. So since the boat, I discovered something that linked me to the kind of writer I wanted to do. And since the boat, I was already being marked by a culture that I was just getting in. So I cannot say that as I cannot say that my books happen in Morocco, because as Simonetta, who read already one of my books, The Secret Gardens of Mogador, all the gardens that are there are informed by gardens from all the world, all around. So it's Morocco, but it's not only Morocco. But something I learned from Morocco was like a basic way of being in the world. And what does a creator needs more than a way of being in the world? It is that what it was called a poetics. It's not only a technology, it is a technology, but it's also a technology that sometimes comes from a science, but is something that makes sense to your life. And if you are lucky enough to produce something that makes sense to the others, that poetics is meaningful for a community. Beyond industry or with industry, that's another element that goes into the thing. But the dimension, the cultural dimension, is something that has many faces and many meanings, according to each one of the participants producing or consuming the cultural elements. So Morocco was something that became for me and for my wife like a producer of messages in this sense. And I do think that was very much because of the physical shock we had in the boat. So we had the feeling that everything that was happening because of that shock, I'm sure that is not something normal or a kind of lucidity. I think that was produced by the hallucination of being so moved for many hours that our sensitivity became weird, became like crazy people understanding the second meaning of things that maybe for many others are not there, but for us it was. And I will tell you several examples of that. One of them is that as we got down in the ship into the market, what we discovered in the market was that all the Moroccan crafts that were there had an extreme similarity with some crafts from Mexico. For example, the pottery. There is a ceramic we have in Mexico that's called Talavera de Puebla. It's a maiolica. It's a kind of ceramic that goes to the oven twice. Before the conquest, the Spanish conquest in Mexico, we had, and we have, many ceramics, a huge quantity of ceramics. Mexico is a great producer of ceramics. But the technology to have ceramics that goes to the oven twice, that means glazed ceramics. That means that the containing of the water is produced by the glaze, because you apply a substance that the second time that it goes to the oven becomes solid and make the water stay into the piece. That's a technology introduced by the Spanish. But one of the things that we learn going to Morocco is that, of course, Morocco had no influence on Mexico. Mexico had no influence on Moroccan ceramics. What was the explanation? The explanation is that Morocco and Mexican ceramists are the great, great grandsons and daughters of a culture that was established in Spain, in Arabic Spain, for 8 centuries. For 8 centuries, 2/3 of what we know now as Portugal and Spain, mainly the south of Spain, was Arabic. And in that time, the technology for things of everyday life, I mean ceramics, tissues, and architectures, was an Arabic technology. So when the conquest of Mexico happened and the establishment of some architecture, some roofs, some tissues, and some pottery, the technology the Spanish brought was mixed with the technology we had. In fact, going further to the whole continent, you can see that the places where the technology to make these everyday things, objects, were produced much more and more accurately in the 2 places where there was 2 empires, in Mexico and in Peru. Because the Indians already had a technology and they were able to appropriate the technology that they received. But the fact is that many of the things that we innocent Mexicans think as 100% Mexicans have many origins. The other, for example, in the textiles, the Indian civilizations had wonderful textiles. They used vegetable fibers. And for them, textiles were a language. But there was no lamp. There was no lamps in America. Lamps were introduced by the Spanish. So the technology that mixed vegetable fibers with wool was a product of the mixture of technologies. Many people think that this introduction of Arabic technology into America was due to some hidden Arabics, but it's not. It didn't come with a religious content. It came as technology, a way of doing things. People refuses to think that because it tells us that many of the ways we live now, we use technologies that are from different origins, and you use it for your everyday life and to produce your own things. The other thing was the architecture. For 2 centuries, all the huge buildings, the buildings with big rooms, and the churches use a way of making roofs with wood in which you use a technology that was Arabic. And some of the roofs you can see in Mexico, for example, in Tlaxcala, I will show you some photos in a while, you see them, and now you can say that is Arabic, but it's not Arabic at all. It was the trace of Spain, and many times was produced by Tlaxcalan builders. The Indians from Tlaxcala were subjugated by the Aztecs. So when the conquerors arrived to Mexico, they made an alliance with the people from Tlaxcala and other Indian populations that were subjugated by the Aztecs. And the conquest was the product also of the alliances made by the Spanish army with the others. And that produces many objects that in a time where the high technology and the high culture. And many of them belong, for example, you can see it in the roofs, you can see in the architecture, in something that we call Baroque. Baroque is not, and that has a link also with Morocco, I will tell you. Baroque is not something that is overcharged. Baroque is not only too much of something. Baroque is a project of civilization in which you go into a feelings machine, for example, a Baroque church, where you have a theater that gets over you with saints and gold and music and incense and a drama of the architecture that gets you from the shadows of the entrance of the building to the place where you have the the two bodies of the church crosses, making a cross. The altar is not at the bottom of the building, is in the place where the two parts of the cross intercept. There you had the altar. And that has a dramaturgy of light that makes that the highest ray of light is exactly placed where the priest takes a piece of bread and in the climax of the ritual converts the bread into flesh of Christ. That's the dogma. That's what the Christians believe. The Catholics believe. So when all of this is through a machine of senses. Baroque is like a multimedia machine of moving you towards an idea, going to an idea through the feelings, through the senses. The key Baroque idea introduced by the Jesuits and the exercise of sendingness is that you can reach God not only by the word of God, but by the senses. It's like a mystical principle. And I have the hypothesis that all the construction of Baroque was in all Europe, but mainly the way the Baroque was built in Spain was impossible without the Arabic master of geometry and the buildings, because all the principles of this dramaturgy of the Baroque church, all the principles of the emptiness of even the image of God, and the highest sense of it is an emptiness. In the Baroque churches, even in Rome, there is many saints, there is many things happening, but the climax is an empty sky, even in the paintings. And that is linked to some of the Islamic heresies. So when you go into Morocco, you need to understand that every civilization is a mixture of history, cultural histories that get together and offer you something that sometimes is beautiful, that sometimes is meaningful. I went with an American Jewish friend to a Baroque church in Mexico, and they were doing the ritual, this ritual in which the hostia, the bread, is transformed into flesh, sacred flesh. And he asked me, are all those people so superstitious? Do they really believe that this bread is now the flesh of God? And shouldn't explain it, but they need to say, it is a symbol. It goes in second degree. It's not that they believe that physically the bread becomes flesh. It's that they believe that in the ritual, this becomes like the flesh. So many of the ways, things we see in other cultures like Morocco that seem like superstitions or very weird beliefs are linked to meanings that we cannot imagine, because they are metaphors of so many, many, many things that are alive, that are still alive. I will show you now one of the objects that for me was very mysterious and magical, and was my first present. Gave a gift, but at first was the present of a friend. Maybe I'm sure that you saw and you heard of an object called the Hamsa, or the hand of Fatma. It's an amulet. And you know, amulets are supposed to have a force, a supernatural power that many times protects you. The Hamsas in Morocco are supposed to protect you from evil eye. It's not by chance that this very Islamic object is also a Jewish amulet. And in at least in most of my friends, for most of my friends, it is an amulet that protects you while you are traveling. For many, Islamic protects houses. For many, Jewish protects travelers. It's full of sense. And you know that there was an exceptional place that is 2 hours from Marrakech, going towards the Atlantic. And it's one of my favorite cities. It's not far from Morocco. It's not far from Marrakech. It is called Essaouira in Arabic, but its name Essaouira only is applied since 1953. Before and for many centuries, because it was first established in the 1st century, it was called Mogador. So when you arrive to the airport, if you go by plane, the airport is named Essaouira Mogador. Even if officially the name is, and in the maps you see it, Essaouira, the ancient name is Mogador. And I choose it like, not completely the space, because I invent a lot and I take many things from other cities and put it into Mogador. But one of the interesting things about Mogador, and that helps you understand also the nature of Morocco, is that this city was re-established in 18th century by a sultan. You know, Morocco was not a country, was a place with sultans and tribes. But there was a visionary sultan that wanted to establish a port that was very important by its commerce. And if he wanted to have very good commerce, he needed to have Jews. He needed to have Jews that came from different parts of the world. So first of all, he kidnapped a French architect to make walls that were not conquerable. He built a city with walls that are really a big fortress. And then he invited Jews from the north of Europe, Ashkenazi, and Jews from Central Europe, what we call now Central Europe, Sepharad, and Jews from the south of the Sahara, what at the time they called Sudani Jews. At the time, Sudan was not what we recognize now as the country Sudan. Sudan was all the south of the Sahara. There were merchants of salt, for example, with caravans. And he decided to make of Mogador a very active port. In some moments, the Jewish population of Mogador was 65% of the population. And it is a small town. But if you go there, you have to visit the Jewish cemetery. There is two, one in front of the other. But there is one by the sea, that is the ancient one, who has 5 levels of tombs. And it's really one of the most beautiful places. And I visited a lot of Jewish cemeteries in the world. And the population there, of course, made the commerce for many things. It was a society, a very active society at the time. As always, there is always conflicts, but there is always common projects. And they had, one of their activities was, and they were artisans of silver. They were jewelers. And one of the things they produced were Hamsas, hands of Fatima. Fatima is the daughter of the prophet. So this was, because there is a legend in which the daughter of the prophet, when there was all the fights between the different alliances inside Islam, the daughter of the prophet extended her hand to protect everyone from one sect, from one tribe or the other. Her hand protected everyone. So it also has a meaning of confluence of races. So he had already an Arabic population, very few, and Islam, a Jewish population, and he had also two other ingredients, Berberic. You know, the Berbers are a huge population that used to be the majority of Morocco. And there was the most powerful tribes, even, you know, that the two principal migrations of Arabic people getting into Spain, conquering Spain, were from Berber origin. Culturally, they were Islamic, but ethnically, they were Berberic. And then surrounding Mogador, you had two huge Berber populations. One of them was Arabophone, speaking mainly Arabic, and the other one is Berberophone, speaking mainly Berber. And these two Berber populations have a lot of differences, but also have a lot of things in common. And one of the things in common is that they have local saints, and they have little churches that you will see when you go in the road, and you see like a little building with a una coupole, a roof that is circle.
A dome.
A dome, a little dome, is called Marabout. Marabout is the temple dedicated to one local saint, and it's also the saint. And you have annually surrounding Mogador 3 different pilgrimages that are huge, and they go from one Marabout to the other. And that is very, very important, because the Jewish population used to participate in those parties, and the Berbers used to participate in the Jewish parties. I saw that. I was in Syria before the war, just before the war, and I was the day of the celebration of the martyrs of the Christian martyrs. And in the Christian neighborhood, there was my friends who were Islamic and Jewish. At the time, the link of all of them was the market. Because, for example, the soap was very important in Damas and in Aleppo. And you have one Jewish, one Christian, and one Christian, all of them in the commerce of soap. And the principal market, the idea of a common city at the time was much more important than their differences. The day that the rebels coming from Iraq, from the Islamic army, the Islamic State, burned the market of Aleppo, 13 kilometers of that was tragic, because that reestablished the differences. And in Morocco, you have one particularity. You have this story of migrations and utopias, but also you have something that makes Morocco different to all the other Islamic countries. The main thing is that the king, well, is not, it's not a democracy, even if they have a parliament and they vote to have the parliament, is not a democracy, it's a kingdom. They have a king. And the king is from the family of the prophet. Invented or not, we don't know, but they do believe that. And when you visit the mosque of Casablanca, and it's interesting because, by tradition, you cannot get into the mosques in Morocco. There is only one in Meknes, and the other one is the biggest and newest one, that is the Casablanca one. And in the Casablanca mosque, you can see the architecture and also the fine art crafts that help to build all that. But and in one of the sides of the mosque, you will see the dynasty from the prophet to the king of Morocco. And that makes a difference, because you cannot have a religious authority like imam, like you have in all the other Islamic countries, that has authority over the king. What is the guarantee? Well, if the king is liberal, the only, well, officially it's an Islamic country, but the fact that the king is an authority over any religious authority makes that the fundamentalism patroned and paid by the Saudis have many difficulties to get and establish an authority in the population of Morocco. And the fundamentalists linked to Daesh and all the time are trying to desacralize the king, because that will allow them, even winning elections, to establish fundamentalism there. But meanwhile, you don't have it. There is a lot of fundamentalism. There has been terrorism attacks linked to all these Saudi influences linked to Wahhabism. But in Morocco, you have by now like a parenthesis of that, because it exists. There is much more veiled women now than the first time we visited Morocco, much more. But there is many paradoxes and there is many ways of being. And one of the differences between the Orthodox Islam and the more varied Islams that you can find in Morocco is that you can have marabouts, that you can have local saints. One of the first terrorist attempts of Daesh in Tunisia was to explode a marabout. close to the capital, close to Tunis, because they are against local cults. They want to have only one truth and only one authority. So all the other varieties of groups, beliefs, local saints are heretic for them, for the fundamentalists. And in Morocco, they are not only allowed, they make the social tissue of the places like. You will see also, because they are everywhere, some musicians in the square of Marrakech and in some restaurants. Some musicians, and you can YouTube them. It's called, the music is called Gnawa, Gnawa. There is great musicians, by the way. But it's like a small band that has specific instruments. And this is another religious component of Morocco that comes from a mixture of African cults, mainly Yoruba, with Islamic cults. You know, in America, we have the Cuban Santeria, and you have sometimes some saints that are at the same time a Christian saint, Santa Barbara. You know, they have double personality. You have that in New Orleans, and you have that in Brazil, Candomblé. Well, you have the same phenomenon in Morocco, but mixing Islamic cult with Black African components of saints. And that produced a special sect called Gnawa. And the main officiants of this are musicians and painters. You have one painter, you can Google too, is Tabal, T-A-B-A-L. And he makes some ritual paintings linked to all these rituals in rituals in which the group begins. There is, from time to time, they have some date. Of course, they have the lunar, and they fixed dates, but movable. And they begin by making like a parade in the city, playing, and the people follows them. And they go into a place they call the Zawiya. It's like their local club, you know, it's the house that belongs to this group, Gnawa group. And then they continue playing, and there they have people who gets into trance, gets in ecstasies, following this, because the music has a cadence that allows people to get into trance without drugs, the drug of music, the drug of a ritual. So for them, it's a spiritual. It's not just a party. They make it for tourists, of course, but it is something that has a sense for them. Well, I will show you now. I don't know how much time do you have. We need to talk about, because we already have an hour, but
yeah, we factor 2 hours, and that hopefully will include some Q&A. So
perfect. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So I speak too much, but I could spend
it's wonderful.
10 hours telling you stories. But I will show you now some of the images I have. So we begin with asking you, Angeline, to share the screen. Is that?
You should be able to share now.
That works?
Yes,
Did it
Perfect.
work?
Yeah. Yes.
that looks good.
You can see the screen?
Yes. No, it was better before, but
Uh,
it's also good.
Okay, like that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. You can see here some of the Fatma hams, what's called Hamsa. You see them, they are over ¿cómo se llama? Un mantel, a cloth that I bought in Fez. But as you can see, there's different designs, and many of them have the David star in the middle, which is very common. You have them that are very precious, like, and then that are very rustic. You have some like the one in the middle. Do you see my point or what I'm signaling or not? No.
Yeah, we can see the cursor.
Okay, you can see this is email. Esmaltada. How to say esmaltada?
Enameled.
Emos, yes. And you can see this one at the left. There is here a kind of amulet square with little figures. This is Berber. This is more Jewish. You can see even here in Hebrew, a Hebrew word. But the others are very common in Islam. Some of them are more, this is, for example, was cut only with scissors. The idea of the Hamsas is that they protect you. But there is many stories telling people that many of the battles that even the city won were because they were protected by this amulet. And as I was telling you, this is not only that they are superstitious. For them, they make a sense, and it's linked to the multiplicity of communities living in the city. There is very few Jews in the community, but there is not, but they exist there. I will show you some more. Oh, what do I? Well, there's a big one. I cannot move very well this. I don't know what.
Anything we can do to help?
I don't know how can I move. That works.
We're seeing the one image of the hand.
And there is another kind of hand. You see, it has a knife. So it is more Islamic. And there was the one that how to say, male?
Enameled? I think it's enameled, right?
Enameled, yes.
Mm-hmm.
This is in wood. And this is a plaster.
I don't think we're seeing what you're seeing,
Yeah, I don't think you're scrolling
Alberto.
through the images. Can you try to press the down arrow? There you go.
Okay,
that one,
okay,
the
yes.
wood one.
Good, yeah.
So, do you see it now?
Mhm, yes.
Well, we'll see the left, but doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is in wood. This comes from Chechauen. It's a city close to Fez that maybe you see some photographs. All the city is blue. Mm-hmm. The walls and the streets and everything is blue. And this is a very elegant one. Mm. You can see this flower in the middle. It's called the Rose of Mogador. Mm. But in fact, it's a coded design that for people knowing to read it, is a David star too. In many of the houses of the Jewish quarter in Marrakech, and in Mogador and in Fez, in the bigger cities, you can see this star when the house belonged to a Jewish family. And it's like a, it's like a code, it's like a password. And one of the things with a protective hand is that sometimes you can have it as tattoos too. You can see here Maggie's hands, Simonetta, with some of the Berber tattoos that are supposed to be amulets too. Amulets, as they are done with henna, they disappear 2 weeks after, but while you have it, it's supposed to be protective. This is a more common, it's supposed to be Jewish, but with a Turkish eye. And there is some versions of the same thing that are abstract, that talks you about the capabilities of the amulet. This is a Hamsa, but look, and this is ancient. It's only the idea of the 5 fingers that you can have with something more beautiful. This is also an amulet, they call it grigri, that has some magical herbs inside each one of these boxes. And the important thing is not only the kind of magical herbs that you have, but it is also 5. Because 5 is a very important figure in cipher in the Islamic world. There is 5 pillars of Islam. There is 5 ways of saying God. There is 5 ways for many of asking for forgiveness. There is 5 moments for the prayer in the day. So the 5 is a powerful number. This is a photograph, ancient photograph, but not so ancient, it's from the 60s, of a storyteller with a halka, with an audience. This is a more contemporary one. You can guess has something of a clown, but it's a storyteller. And you can see the attention the audience has. This is a very well-known storyteller. You can see here in the 2 photographs is the same person. And he uses images of sacred stories. And you see the attention of the people surrounding him. Other photographs of storytellers with halkas.
Can I ask you a question, Alberto?
Yes.
Is the halkas only men, no women?
You know that one of the terrible things in Morocco is that the streets belongs to men. That's quite sad, but it's a fact. Cafes are for men. Well, women are not forbidden, but they are not there. There is very few women that you see everywhere, but you will see more than in these photographs. But you can see, for example, this woman in pink, but there are very few. And they are sometimes selling too. They are working. You see more women working than going around. There is the pails of the 19th century visitors of Fez. And one of the things they explain is how you see so many men in the streets and in the public places. And so when you ask, where is the space for the woman? And at the time in Fez, the space for the woman were the roofs. So there is some tales and some pictures of the city of Fez, and all the roofs are like living rooms only with women. And there's the story of a sultan that built a tower, and all the city tore down the tower because nobody was allowed to see all the women. It was not that they were naked, it was nothing. It was her life, was their space. The other space that I even tried to explore in one of my novels by asking women their space is the hammam, the bathroom, the Turkish bath, in the moment that is allowed to women. And the other one is the oven. But the main public space is the hammam, which is indoors. So it's true, but
Thank you.
there is a sacred book, this one, that tells about a storyteller and a halka. And this is called Badi al-Samam. And one of the things that interested me, that took me from the storytellers to something that influenced my books, is that the genre they use to tell the stories is not only a short story. It is something that is at the same time a reflection, means like an essay, a story, and a poem. And they call that adab. The adab is a mixture of genres that takes you to the principle that even the literary genres are a cultural product. This is the same book, it's a classical. I have one book as well, Poetics of Wonder, that was published in the United States as an essay, as a nonfiction. In Mexico, as a short story. In France, as a novel. And it had been just published in India as a poem. It's the same text with no variations, but it was classified differently for each one of the consumers. I will show you the pottery, this ceramics that is very similar to the one you see in Mexico, is from Morocco. I go faster. This is Moroccan. It's very similar to what is made in Mexico, but it's Moroccan. I was making a project with a writer I advise you to read, is Fatima Mernissi. She has a book about her life in a family with several women. It's called The Dreams of the Threshold. She was very well known. She died now, but she was a very well known Moroccan woman working in American universities. This has a very similar design that the last one we saw, but this is a Mexican gentleman. You could see, you could tell that it's like Indian, and it's the elegant feature of the Mexican. This is from Morocco. And this figure, you can find it even in architecture. This is Moroccan too, but this is Mexican. This is Mexican. This is Moroccan. This is a Moroccan weaver. This is a Mexican one. The flowers are very similar. This one is Berber. And this is one of the roofs I was telling you about, the Tlaxcala roof. You will see this a lot in Morocco. And in Mexico, there is a few. The ones that the towns were not so rich that to change it for stone, and so they kept them. They were so beautiful. Now we value them, but at the time they preferred to be more modern. This is the same Tlaxcalan roof. This is Moroccan. The interesting thing for me is that this mandala was made by an artist who is the artist of Selig. The Spanish word azulejo doesn't come from azul, but from the Arabic word Selig. And the master who makes this is like a spiritual master. It's called Malem. In all the craft professions, there is a master that teaches the apprentices how to do things. And it has, this learning is a spiritual initiation. And that's why this is mandala. When I went to India, a journalist asked me, what kind of mandala are your books? And I said, well, you know, I don't think of my books as mandalas. And they said, oh, it's strange because we decipher in your books a geometry. And in fact, there is a geometry in my books, but it's hidden. It's hidden. So only someone who is used to interior codes can decipher it. So I asked the journalist, but how did you did it? And she showed me how she did it. And I said, well, for you, what kind of mandala are my books? And she said, for us, a mandala is a work of art that, besides being beautiful, help us to have a reflection. And that beauty that help us to think, help us to live. They said, well, I said, well, you know, I don't know if I did that, but for me, it becomes an aspiration. This is a Moroccan fountain. So I tried in one of my books that tell a story that when you are in one point, you feel that this is the center and it doesn't take you anywhere. And you move a little bit and you are in another place and it's another center. And when you are there, when you make like a close up, you feel that that's the center of the world. And like that in all the movements that were made. The interesting thing for me, behind this, is that to do this, you need to use this technology. This is called the Vedic square. You know that all the north of India, Rajasthan, and was in the hands of the Mughal civilization. And they use this, and not by chance, it's called Vedic square. You see, it seems very simple. 9 squares one side, 9 squares the other. The interesting thing is that this formula is the one that allows you to mix forms that are completely different, because this is what they have in common. And they apply it this way. You see, if you put all the 4s together, you have this form. If you put all the 7s together, link all the 7s, you have a rectangle. You have the 9s, you have a square. So to make this, you have 9 times 9 different forms in different size. You have 81 size that are the product of combining all these forms. And from there, they do also the stars, the triangles. The octagons are very important. The pentagons, and they double them. So I use this to give an order, to give a composition to the different parts of my books. Nobody knows it. And really, I was amazed to see that the journalists could know that. But in fact, that's what is behind the apparent disorder that makes my book so weird. You can see that also in the writing, in the calligraphy. You see, it seems that they make a design that has an order, but in fact, each one, as any typography, each letter is a design. And the Arabic letters are designs too, as you can see, even the most simple ones. In my books, I had the chance of having Hassan Masoudi, a calligraphist, including the designs as part of the story. One of the wonderful things that you as an author cannot planify is that sometimes, and when I began to publish my books, I made this. And many readers, my halka, my audience, began to use that as tattoos. I will finish very soon. For example, I received until now 158 photographs like that. And I asked each one of the persons who did it why they did it. And to my surprise, each one made it for a different reason. So and I told them to tell me the story. In one of my blogs, going through my main page, you can see some of the stories they wrote. For example, this one, the original in the book is this one. So she made herself that one. Or that one. Some of them are hidden. It's like a code between lovers, or something that is not a code, is something else. All of them have a meaning. For example, this is a fan that took all. His ambition is to have all the tattoos in his body. The calligraphy is also in ceramics. So one of my books is supposed to be what is written here. One of the most amazing surprises that I received is not only that some readers became like a skin edition of my books without any merit. I don't have any merit. It is the reader who took part. But to finish, I will tell you this story. She was my translator to Italian, who lives in Mexico. She's at university. She made a PhD on medieval studies. And she was so fun that she was not only satisfied having a tattoo. She decided to become a calligraphist. She went to Morocco. She learned enough Arabic to get into a group of a big master, a big malam, and become an apprentice. And her work of graduation, as we say, her work of initiation, was to make the calligraphies of one of my books. And she made this that are very different. And this, to finish, is about wonder. We were traveling, Maggie and I will finish with this, towards Mogador from the south, because we went first to the south. And we saw far some bushes with something over the bushes. So I, with it was not clear. We didn't see exactly what we saw now. So I told to my wife, with all my knowledge of the country, I said, you see those trees far away? There is some vultures over there. There should be a cow, a dead cow that they are waiting to eat. And she said, you know, well, she's always right, even when she's a little bit wrong. She said, you are very blind, Alberto, you are completely blind. Why? Because those are not birds. They have 4 legs. We got closer and there was a pack of goats over the trees, with a shepherd taking guard of them, looking to the sky, looking to the eye. And I was very enthusiastic. And I told the Moroccan, we were in a public transportation. I told the Moroccan who was next to me, say, look at that, how marvelous, how great. And he said, what? Look, the goats. I said, what's with the goats? He saw me like a crazy. What's strange about the goats? I said, they are over the trees. And he said, goats are always over the trees. I learned that something that for us is marvelous, for the others could be everyday life. And maybe one of the books, one of them, the goals of being a poet is to find the goats of the tree, the goats over the trees in everything you do and everything that surrounds you, in your country, in your work, in your wife, in your friends. So to find goats over the trees of everything surrounding me was like my aesthetics of wonder. For me, this was wonder. And it's not magical realism. It's not fishes going through the air. It's not an angel falling like in magical realism. It does exist. It's biology. And I said to a Moroccan friend, oh, I understand, as there is nothing there, differently to our goats, they developed the capability of climbing. And he said, maybe yours lost it. Maybe all goats had it and you lost it. So you see the relativity of cultures. 30 kilometers south of Essaouira, when you are in Marrakech, you can see the goats over the trees. This tree is called argan. It's a marvelous plant too. It goes, the roots goes 20 meters under the earth, where find water where anything else. And they have a fruit where they make, in an artisan way, the argan oil. Well, we can finish there and go with the questions if you want it.
Thank you, Alberto.
Angela, and you take me.
What a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much.
Well, you know,
I like to travel with you.
I have many other stories, but I wanted only to sparkle some ideas. Thank you so much to you.
Thank you, Alberto. I wish we had 4 hours. But you know, one day we may travel together. Who knows? Are there any questions? Samantha?
Hello, Samantha.
Hello. I just thank you so much. Oh my gosh, I'm blown away. Thank you so much. I'm really struck by how similar this city sounds like Granada. This with the Alhambra and that sort of meeting of the 3 cultures. And I've also struck by your descriptions of all of these different materials and the gesture with the materials, this sort of interaction of all of these different cultures coming through materials in similar ways. And I was really wondering about your thoughts about mysticism and the relationship between the material itself and the gesture of interacting with the material, and whether that might be a way of opening mysticism up from, say, this vertical imposed relationship of an idea onto the material, sort of building it from the ground up as sort of as an emergent mysticism. I was wondering what you might think about that.
Oh, thank you so much, Samantha. For me, it's a key question. I thank you so much for bringing it, because, you know, one of my interests when I was getting into Morocco, I had two main worries. One was to find my own voice as a writer. I didn't want to be another imitator of Garcia Marquez or the main Mexican writers at the time. So find my own voice. And the other one was to understand something about the woman I was living with, and I wanted to continue living with her. That means that as a Mexican man, I have the education of any other Mexican. And understanding in a prestigious way is called understanding woman's desire. And for me, Morocco was the hardest way of understanding it. And it's linked to your question. I go there. Because as a foreigner and traveling with a woman, I was able to get into women's society. I was able to talk to women and ask them about their stories and love stories. Because as very poor students, we met someone in the bus and we finished sleeping in their houses many, many times. We made a lot of friends. And I was able to understand so many things that men don't understand. And there is like an extreme example of what we live in our societies. And one of the ways that was for me a lesson was to avoid completely, for example, because for me, eroticism and mysticisms are linked. I will go there. And to avoid the idea of conquering. The goal of love is not to conquer someone, but is a way of knowledge. One of the things I learned in Morocco is that love is knowledge. There is in studying the adapt, there is two main branches of philosophy of love. One is linked to books like manuals to satisfy the Sultan. And the other way is like philosophy to understand love. And I'm very much in love with this other way of thinking, love, that makes a line, the same line is mysticism. For example, one of the chapters in one of my favorite books called El Collar de la Paloma, it's in English, it has several names according to the translation, but it's the necklace of the dove. One of the names of the chapter is not the positions to satisfy the soul, but it's about the signs of love that you make with your eyes. Think of love as language. And the final goal is absolutely heretical, in the sense that loving someone, getting in love with someone, is deciphering their signs, not only through the size, but through the touch, through the words. And doing that, the other person, the person you love, becomes a goddess or a god. So making love is making of the other something sacred, absolutely sacred. And that absolute sacredness lasts 1 second. The moment of revelation is mysticism. The moment of union with the other. I try to study all the Arabic, Hinduistic, all the Kama Sutras, everything that I could about love. And one of the more intense descriptions of erotic love is a mystics book by San Juan de la Cruz. The poems of San Juan de la Cruz describes the soul, the lover, as a soul that melts in the fire of the god. And the way he describes that is absolutely pornographic. You don't say that it's a saint who wrote that. And it's the kind of things that are forbidden by Orthodox. So the crafts like calligraphy, like the tiles, the cellige, all of them have a mystical path. And all of them have an eroticism in the wider sense of the word. I mean, eroticism is not only sexual, is the senses, is sensual. The implications of this are so huge that are avoided by many of the ways of thinking love and religion. Many, and you know, it's a big challenge for men. I'm much interested in this subject because, well, you know, I live with a very intelligent woman, and we have been living and thinking through this, and Maggie was an early feminist in the 70s, so I was like introduced to all my limitations very soon. And finally, the narrator in all my books is a man trying to understand, and understanding that you never finishes to understand, that you are always understanding. That paradise, for example, in the secret gardens of Mogador, that Simonetta read, is about the possibility of attaining paradise in a life of couple. And my hypothesis is that you do it for a second. And you need to gain it again. So you don't conquer something and you don't have it. It's very common in men to say, well, I already have this love, man or woman. Not the idea that you need to begin your path again every day, every moment. The moment you have it, you are going further. The bad education we have is linked to the idea of accomplishment, to the idea of satisfaction. At least my experience is that when you have a nice experience in any field, in travel or in love, if you had something good, you want more. And that puts you in the path of mysticism.
Thank you very, very
much. I don't know if that answers your question, what you wanted, or something, or I went to other sites. No, it's okay.
It was another lecture in itself. I see two hands up here. Anna first. Would you like to ask your question?
Yes. I'm so dazzled and fascinated, and also bewildered, to use a word that I'm getting acquainted with, and that I find so interesting. And I would like to know if you have like some sense. I know you said you're not linked to the writers of the boom at all, but when I started to read your I think it's the Garden of Mogador or something like that. I just read a first passage, and I couldn't stop thinking of El Jardín de los Senderos que se bifurcan. But then I realized that Mogador is a real place. And I then went into this amazing journey that you took me into something that is, yes, real, but then you made it, I mean, it is of this world, but you made it out of this world. And you started opening like these boxes of this cabinet of fascinating things and experiences that are kind of akin to your experience in the boat, you know, in the fourth class, in which you were moved in such senses that everything was like sprouting, maybe that's a word. And I wanted to know if you think of these of yourself as a writer, as an unlocker of other worlds and of experiences, as in these boxes, and you yourself being turned into these other authors and I don't know, other characters of your own books.
Oh, thank you so much. And of course, telling you that I didn't want to be like the others, I only mean that I didn't want to be an imitator,
Right,
an epigon. But I devour them. They are my classics, you know? And of course, if you don't read Borges, you lose part of the beauties of the world. Of course, I'm closer to some more than the others, and to some works more than the others. I feel very close to José Lezama Lima. Borges, of course, is fascinating, but people trying to imitate him never will reach that. It's like imitating Juan Rulfo. You know, there's things that people think that they make similar and they cannot. But what I have a consciousness of being informed by so many things. And one of the things I learned in Morocco is that when you are a writer, you are not influenced only by books. You are influenced by everything. People, of course, but the other arts. For example, one of my and not only from Morocco, one of my tales, the names of the air, is the story, is the first one of my stories, and it's a question about woman's desire. So with my wife, we saw a woman in a window, and she was looking at the horizon and the sun. And the second day we passed by the wall, she was there. And the third time she was there again. So I began to ask everyone, what was she doing? And why she was like that? I said, or everybody knows or nobody knows. And to my surprise, everybody knew, but everyone had a different idea of what happened. For a man who was merchant downstairs, he was sure that she stole something, and she was weird because she stole something from his store. a young man was sure that she was in love with him. A sweet guy, he didn't know, and he was in love with her. And you know, everyone puts their own desire in the shut mouth of this woman. And I think that the same thing happens with books and other influences. So first, I do believe that you don't write, and one of my teachers, Roland Barthes, said, writing is an intransitive verb. You write, but you need to write. I never said, I will write a poem, I will write a novel. I write what I need to write. And it's the problem of the publishers to classify it later. But once I'm working, I need techniques to make compositions. So many of my techniques come from books. I will tell you the main influence in the book you read, The Secret. But in many of my books, the influence comes from crafts. So Los Nombres del Aire, the names of the air, begins with a woman, and she walks, but the scene happens in the future. She walks, and you think that what you saw is the past. And the technique I use is, you know, there is a skirt they make in Mexico. They weave it with a tube. They don't make a square and they put it together. They make a tube. They weave a tube. And they design some scenes of characters in the belt. And depending on where you put it, the story begins. And so as a creator, it gives you the consciousness that normally we say, okay, we see this is a flashback, but this is like bidimensional. In fact, there is many times, the time in which you are writing, the time in which the thing is written, and the time the story is telling. And according to you, if you move where you place yourself, the story that you tell begins in a different point. So I tried to make a design of that, and I moved until I find where I wanted to begin. There is no literature where I could find that. At least I don't know. And so I took the technique from weaving techniques from women. And I'm with my wife, Margarita, we work a lot on Mexican crafts, and we have a lot of books of research on techniques and everything. So that's a field we love to learn. But at the same time, you are writing, and you need to have a consciousness of who made something similar, or not to apply it, but maybe to take a distance. So The Secret Gardens of Mogador has a link with the imaginary cities of Italo Calvino, no doubt. And he's an author I know very well and that I admired. I met him as an audience and when he was giving lectures in Paris. And I said, what I want to do is different. In which way I can take from him and in which way I can do something different. One of the things that I cannot avoid is to think that doesn't exist a formula that you apply to the story you want to tell. So there is not a form novel of a form short story of a form sonnet. Then you tell in that form what you need to know. As an artist, I think that you need to invent the form, or the variation of the form, that is the best to the story you need to tell. That's a problem because each one of my novels has a different form. And it's a way of boycotting you, taking you out of the market and out of your own work. So each time I need to invent something. So what happened
with the secret gardens of Mogador. It's the story of a woman who decides to educate the desire of his men, and she challenges him, making of him a Shahrazad. If you don't tell me a secret garden, we cannot make love. So he's threatened of erotic death. And he says, well, there is no gardens in Mogador, but the garden you have, the garden of your father who just died. She's pregnant and her father died. So she's in shock, and the new boyfriend, lover, husband, whatever, the new couple doesn't follow her desires. So instead of going away, she decides to educate him, asking him to go to the world and look as a garden, as a place transformed by desire, a secret garden, and learning to read the extreme desires of the world with the hope that he will become a better lover. In the book, I don't care about if he becomes a better lover, but he becomes a better storyteller. I even took away from him a psychology. He has no psychology. The narrator has no name. He had a name, I took out the name. He is what he tells. And every time, but she doubles the challenge, because she says, okay, you will come and tell me the desires and the places, the existences that people transform with an intense desire. You will tell me them, but pay attention. You cannot invent any desire. All the desires that you will tell me have to exist in the world. But you have to, the way of telling me them. You have to find the way of presenting them to me, which is an erotic approach too. And he tries every night, comes, and what I finally made was like a pantone, like a variated catalog of many ways of telling desires. Sometimes making homage to some writers. For example, I was invited to give a lecture to the University of Kansas. And I was the research on that book took me 6 years, going from garden, to place, to collection, finding places that people transform with extravagance and extreme desire. So I was invited to Kansas, and I was happy because I knew that in the Kansas Art Museum, there was a collection of this sculpture who was in Mexico, Henry Moore, and he inspired himself in pre-Columbian art. And I knew that they just bought 20 sculptures, and well, I'm sure that they placed them in a garden. I said, well, that will be a wonderful garden so that my narrator could have the love of Hasiba, of the and when I arrived, there was no passion. There was only a curator conceptually placing, but without a passion, without extravagance, without desire. But I got inside the museum, and what did I find? I found something very weird for me. Was a collection of more than 100 small cages, each one a work of art. And I said, what? At first, without reading anything, what are those cages? It's like a very, very tiny, small hummingbirds. I knew that it was like dwarf hummingbirds, or what is this? I began to read and I discovered that were cages for crickets, for grasshoppers. And there was a couple of collectors who passed all their life collecting beautiful cages for grasshoppers. And I said, well, you know, I saw that most of them were from China, some of them were from Japan, Southeast Asia, a few, but mainly some weaved were from Myanmar, but mainly they came from China. And I said, well, if they donated this to the museum, they surely donated their library about this. Because with this passion, you need to learn something. So I asked to go to the library, the special library of the museum, and I found a collection of books about these cages and what was behind. Some emperors or noblemen who collected grasshoppers and who called it a garden of voices. And these brought me to the fact that they had plants too, but all the plants were only to feed the grasshoppers. Some grasshoppers lived many years and some died in a week. And there are so many kinds of grasshoppers. So I wrote a story about a garden where the gardener classified the grasshoppers according to their sounds. Because one of the important things about all the grasshoppers is because it was a garden of voices, is the noises, the music they make. And I found even there several collections. There was a German and there was a Japanese record of voices of grasshoppers. It was amazing. So the gardener had to be a blind gardener. And in that way became a homage to Jorge Luis Borges. But you know, in a very indirect way.
We are back to the first start of the circle.
Yes.
Thank you, Alberto.
So I don't know if that answers, Anna.
Oh my God, that was a trip.
Thank you. I think we can probably end it here. We are a little over time, and Alberto, would you be open to receiving other questions in a written form?
Yes, of course. And I saw
Right.
that Eileen wanted to ask something. I don't know. I have time. I don't know if yes, I have time.
Those who want to leave or need to leave, please do so. Eileen, did you have a question?
Well, I thank you so much. I think that you've said so many things and just shown us moments of awe, which is just incredible, how you reveal them. You know, you made me think of you know, so many people talk about conquering mountains when they hike, and I've done hiking, and I was always surprised when someone would say, it's not conquering the mountain, you're becoming more intimate with the mountain. Anyway, you talk about wonderful answer about the mystics, and you talk about boxes, and I'm just curious. I've heard about a Jesuit box that had mirrors inside of it. So when you open it up, you would see only a little bit, but you would know that there's much more to see, but that you're only seeing a bit of it. And it was in some exhibition of you know, boxes that have to do with stories. And I just wondered if you had heard of anything like that, because I haven't been able to find information on it. And you talked about the boxes in the Indian storytellers, and they would open the box. So it's incredible stories that you've just woven together that just create moments of awe, I think, for all of us. It was really just amazing. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Eileen. Well, I tried to answer briefly, but the box you tell was made by a Jesuit, which was a wonderful man. I'm very, very interested. It's called Matteo Ricci. He was the first Occidental to get into the Forbidden City in China. And there was a huge exhibition because Stanford bought a huge collection of his books and a huge collection of objects he fabricated. And he was allowed into the Forbidden City because not only because he knew a lot of astrology, of knowledges that the emperor wanted to, but also because he invented a method of memory. There's a beautiful book about him that's called The Palace of Memory. He's one of the characters in another one of my novels that is called Los Sueños de la Serpiente. But this Jesuit is amazing. Is really one of the main characters to understand something. And I will tell you briefly the story. I was with, well, all his books are amazing, amazing. Like the boxes, imagine 1,000 more inventions. He was worried about everything, and everything is scientific. So this is optics. Is not only like a kaleidoscope. It's really an object of a moment of research, deep research. He was a Baroque character, a Jesuit, and I was by chance in Sweden the day that Octavio Paz received the Nobel Prize. I was invited by him. And the man who won the Nobel Prize in Physics, there was two of them. And one of them was an American who discovered the quarks. And the quarks were, in that moment, it's 1990, the smaller particles of matter that you can find. Is smaller than the atom. And he won the Nobel Prize because he found the mathematical formula to grasp the quark. So it was very nice because in the dinner, the Octavio Paz made a poem about physics and astrology, and the physician told a short story about him wanting to catch an elusive character who was the quarks. And by chance, I was in his table, and I asked him, say, well, I don't know if you can answer this now, but I'm always, when there's a great discovery, a huge discovery, like the law of relativity, there is always, when someone gets the sky, there is always a stair. There's always a middle step. So I put some examples. For example, Gustave Le Bon invented the law of relativity, but he didn't invent the way to demonstrate it. And he had a polemics with Einstein, and Einstein went beyond. So I asked him, who or which idea was your first step to climb to the top and arrive to a deductive physics that gets you, make this huge discovery worth the Nobel Prize? And he said something that amazed me. He said, Matteo Ricci and Kircher, which was another Jesuit who invented and communicated. He was really like the couple of magicians, Athaneus Kircher. And I said, well, you amaze me because I read both of them as I read Alice in Wonderland. They are amazing stories. For me, it's the finest imagination. And he said, that's it. Lewis Carroll was a mathematician. The other side of the Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass is deduction. all of it is deduction. So I climbed over the steps of these two Jesuits. And I said, well, and did you write about it? I want to know more, no? And he said something that amazed me. He said, if the Baroque project of civilization was not vanquished by the positivist revolution of Protestantism, we would have relative physics, quantum physics, 150 years before.
Wow.
Just think about that.
So we are surrounded by the possible. We are harassed by the possibilities we have, but we don't know sometimes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Alberto, such a coincidence. I was recently came across some of them maps that Matteo Ricci made.
Oh, really?
Beautiful maps of China.
Amazing.
Among the first ones, yeah.
Yes, when I went to China, I really was stubborn to find his grave, which is a Chinese stele, and I found it in the yard of the School of Foreign Commerce, which is a building of the 70s, horrible, but fortunately they kept the graves in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to the Jesuit, there's a Jesuit Institute of Studies where they keep all his books, and he have a lot of material of him and another travelers. And I saw the maps there because they have a huge section of maps. But amazingly, and accordingly to the Jesuit and Baroque theory, when you get into the Institute, even in the exterior is a modern building, you get there to the Center of Chinese Studies owned by the Jesuits. The first corridor is a hutong, which means ancient medieval corridor of the streets that most of them are destroyed in Beijing. They don't exist anymore. So it's amazing because the whole Center of Studies began teaching you through your senses. Before the ideas, you were surrounded in each one of the spaces by some very sensuous and sensorial concept.
It strikes me that you sort of just gave a perfect definition of topological studies. You know, that's precisely why we go to places, so that you're not just learning ideas in the abstract, but you experience them through the places where they were developed or where they flourished, where they took shape.
Great.
Thank you for that. It's all of a sudden, you know, it's sort of getting clarity.
Well, it's a Baroque idea.
Yes. And with that idea, I hope we can soon travel to Morocco and Mexico. Hopefully in your company, but you know, even with your books. The beginning of the journey.
In my books, I put so many things that that there's always so many more that I want to put. No, but I hope that when you go, I'll be there. I used to go at least twice a year or once a year to Morocco.
Mm-hmm.
They invited me to give lectures but now didn't happen now, of course.
We have to wait.
Very soon.
Thank you, Alberto, for your time. It's been
it's
a wonderful
really,
gift. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to be with you, really. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for your wonderful participation and your questions. I know there will be many more.